Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Hi, Vic.
Oh, there you are. Well, let's get this rocking and rolling. On behalf of the Gatekeepers, let's back up a minute. On behalf of the Gatekeepers team, hello and welcome to all of you today to the Gatekeepers team conference call. Today's date, Tuesday, January 17th, 2017. And I'd like to say hello to a dear friend of ours, Mr. Thomas. Thomas, it's been a while. I haven't seen your name on the call board for a minute. I hope everything's good with you. That's Thomas Y. in specific. And I'd like to thank Carolyn. Thank you, Carolyn, for she texted me and said, I didn't hear the recording. So she's been under the weather a bit, and so we pray that you get better as well. And thank you so much, Carolyn. I love you too as well. So, folks, it's been an interesting last couple of days. I know the weather's a bit different again, as we have some parts that are supposed to be, well, nice and cold, and they're warmer, and spots that are supposed to be nice and warmer are a bit colder. But I do have to say that it's much appreciated that the rainfall that we've received here in California is very, very welcome. We're looking to get some more rain here by tomorrow evening and going through the weekend, which I'm looking forward to. I've never had a problem working, and let alone I've never had a problem working in the rain. However, there is a problem that I have to bring to the forefront here. So, the city of Palm Springs last year went through an ordeal, and IRS was involved, the feds were involved, and there was some conspiracy factors, well, we hate to say it, but the truth is the truth. There was some racketeering. There was some money that came up short. There were some major levels of corruption where the mayor was conspiring with a major contractor for some properties and a lot of that nonsense. So to cut to the chase, our season out here, and yes, we will be welcoming President Obama as a civilian Friday afternoon. He'll be flying back out here on Friday afternoon. I'm sure to enjoy some much-needed rest and do some golfing, which he's an avid golfer from what I hear. So the issue. So this past summer, when the season has dwindled down, the weather's a lot warmer. Most people don't want to come out to Palm Springs when it can hit a scorching 125 degrees. So obviously we get the snowbirds from Canada, and we welcome them very much, and thank you to all the Canadians. And we love you as our neighbors, and we just appreciate you all. And yet, the disrespect shown to the people coming to this airport by the city and the construction company that they took upon themselves to contract with to do some asphalt work. Well, this past summer, they had this place tore up from the floor up. And it was summer, and we dealt with it, and you get brand new cars, and you're driving them to the airport. They get all filthy dirty, and customers walk out. They want to get in their car and go, wow, did you guys wash this car? We go, yes, sir. We just unfortunately had to drive it on a dirt road here. And you apologize, and they aren't so happy. And you go, listen, we'll take care of the difference when you return the car. We'll discount something or whatever for the inconvenience. But then these rocket scientists running this construction company as well as the city hall, they decide that the best time to repave El Cielo Drive, right in front of the airport entrance, is right now. Not in the summer, not 6 months from now, but right now when we're peaking and moving in anywhere from 500-600 clean cars and taking out 500-600 clean cars, anywhere from 1,000 movements a day, and that's not one. And I mean that's just one company, and we have majors. We have all the majors. So an influx of anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 cars coming in and out of that airport. So you can imagine what I'm trying to say, hopefully, that we have cars that come into the return lane, and we have those cars that have to go back to the wash. And amongst this, we got this big machine that just eats up the gravel. Actually, it eats up the asphalt so they can recycle it and repave it. And half the construction crew is just standing around with a shovel in their arm, leaning on it, and they're like laughing at us. And so I tell this one guy, the head of the construction crew, I go, boy, you guys sure pick a great time of year to decide to construct or repave the front of the airport when we have people the world over coming here, and this is nonsense. And his simple answer to me was, well, it's the economics of it. Economics of it? I'm thinking to myself, what do you know about economics that you're telling me the economics of it? The economics of it is you're throwing a damper. Already people have, across the country, have dealt with delayed flights. Already the country over, people are dealing with harsh weather, trying to get to and from the airport, say, or on the interstates in Oklahoma, places where there's black ice all over the place. So they're a little uptight, and then they get to Palm Springs thinking, well, we're coming on vacation, and definitely we don't want to go home on probation. So they go with the flow. But it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for me. It's embarrassing, as I say, to have to now deal with these same customers that are going to be returning a bit irate. So everything in life is timing. There's a time for each of the seasons. And now the time has come upon us that we are going to see the departure of one of our presidents, President Barack Hussein Obama, and the coming of President Donald Trump. And I know in the news we've heard a lot of nonsense again. And I just want to ask each and every one of you on the call. Okay. You know, okay. They've always said, as President Obama today pardoned some I don't know, convicted or whatever, some people that were serving long terms or whatever. So if President Obama can see it in his heart to basically pardon an individual and give someone, as they say, a second chance at life, what's wrong with the normal populace then? You might not like Trump. You might not. But before you've walked a mile in his shoes, at least, I would say, give the guy a fair opportunity. Yeah, Vicky Twitters all kinds of nonsense and all that. Okay, so aside from that, he's going to be your president. He's going to be my president. He's going to be the president of the United States of America. Whether you like him or you don't, that has come to pass. And Friday, God willing, nothing happens from now till Friday, because there's been a lot of obnoxious conversations, a lot of people wanting to protest. That's fine. Protesting, I don't have a problem with. But when there's vocabulary put out to the public that his term might be very short-lived, I don't take that nicely. I don't like that. After all, if President Obama can reconcile issues with Cuba now, where we'll be sharing information. And again, on this call, we talked about a lot of people who had done heinous crimes or some serious malicious crimes or money laundering or big game, like we spoke of Edward Wilson and one of his partners that was involved with Gaddafi and trying to supply Gaddafi a nuclear weapon or nuclear capacity. Well, that gentleman found life, not distorted, but went about living his life in Cuba, and pretty much nobody knew who he was. Well, our intelligence knew he was down there. But now there's a new sharing of information with our intelligence communities, and Cuba's going to fall into order with the wants of the United States as far as money laundering and a lot of things of that nature. So did everything President Obama did feel good on my skin? No. Did I vote for President Obama? No. But did I respect him as a president? Yes. Do I respect him as a human being? Yes. Do I agree with all his policies? No. Am I happy about the Iranian P5+1 nuclear accords? No. I'm not happy. Not happy. A lot of things Obama did that I'm not happy about, especially the red line. And there was a conversation with Susan Rice in regards to that question. And that question is a very hard question to answer. And again, in his interview on 60 Minutes, he didn't like that question that was given to him. And so you know what? I'm going to have to live with it, one way or the other. But draw the red line. It was he who drew the red line. And so that, of all things, upsets me more than anything, is that we got disrespected as a nation. Our president got disrespected, and our military got disrespected. So, yeah, we've moved a lot, and believe me, we're not going to share that information until it comes out in the news. But believe me, 3 weeks ago, Joey and I had a very serious conversation. And both her sources and my checking of my sources, what we had discussed was verbatim and on the spot Johnny. That we were going to be moving some forces along to the borders of the Soviet. Well, I keep saying Soviet Union. That's how I think of them, of the borders of Russia and into the Ukraine and into Poland. And lo and behold, came out on national news that President Obama had moved some 2,500 soldiers into and a lot of machinery, a lot of artillery were being moved up to the Russian border. So we just wait for things to shake out. If we know something, especially Joey or myself, I'm not gonna be a cause in any way, shape, or form of that kind of intelligence, even if it was naively or how should I say? It wasn't designed to create anything, but it was just in conversation. Sometimes when people speak to you in confidence, that's where it should lie. And we both knew, but we didn't mention anything, and I'm mentioning it tonight. So there's things that maybe have passed her ear or my ear, or we've even discussed, but we felt that now's not the right time to discuss it. Like she's read an article to herself, or maybe read it to me, and said, I'm just going to store that away until the time is right. And then maybe a month later, or 3 weeks later, she'll say, I feel it's time to read the community this article now. So we're not going to be hurting anybody by revealing anything, because like we said a million times, a lot of people listen to this call from a lot of different agencies. As a matter of fact, last week, RT News was on our call, Russian television. So I said that to say that no matter what the Russians did or what the Russians didn't do, cometh this Friday, January 20th, we will experience the inauguration of a new president. And with that, changing of the guards. So, many of you have texted me this last week and just wondering, how my new job is going. And Bob called me and was, just, hey, how you doing and everything. He was a bit under the weather himself. And I said, thank you very well. And I'm the same Vic, folks. It doesn't matter to me what the job title is. It doesn't matter to me. I know that today I was under a lot of pressure. I know that I had a lot to get done, but I had made all of you a promise, and I said, "We'll see you next Tuesday." And it might be a tad late. Joey texted me, said I'm running about 10, 15 minutes late. My text back there was, "So am I." And so we're here. So another Tuesday evening. I'm sure we're going to have a great evening of news. But I want to say this again before we get started. I don't know what you guys listen to on American TV or what you listen to on European TV or whatever you listen to on any other call or whatever. When you come to this call, hopefully you come to this call because it's a learning experience. You take something, you learn something, you take something from this call that benefits you. And again, I had a couple of friends of mine just saying, boy, these people just won't stop with the nonsense and stuff. Look, folks, we read the article last call. Things are happening in the early part of 2017, whatever. That doesn't make us or put us in a position to begin to speculate. Whatever you have, whatever you're sitting on, whatever you got, be happy with that. We're not here chiming and diming. We're not here like, oh, by the way, Barnum and Bailey, they're shutting down their doors after 140-something years. Well, because the animal activists got sick and tired of their animals being abused and the elephants being abused. And so that Barnum and Bailey, the greatest show on earth, is shutting its doors. So does animal rights, do animal activists, when they strive to achieve goals and they struggle to see how others maybe don't see what they see, and then they expose the truth, and they work hard, maybe a lifetime at it. Like, what was that? Gorillas in the Mist or whatever? Scientists go into rainforests and have studied different species for years, their whole life. And they try to tell us, hey, if we don't be careful here, if we don't be careful there, their food supply is diminishing. People are moving up into their territory. Now the animals are fighting the humans for their food source. And in the jungle, no matter how good of a hunter that alpha male lion is, no matter how good he is, no matter how much hunting he does and brings for the family, if he that day comes that he thinks he's the baddest and can't be taken down, and he's like an anarchist, or he starts sharing only that catch with his cronies so he can overpower them, they take that ace one prey, they take him down, that alpha predator. They take him down. The rest of the family takes him down because they realize that this guy today is acting like this. Tomorrow he's going to be out of control. He'll get us all killed. And that's in the kingdom, the wild kingdom, the animal kingdom. So The reason I'm saying that is if you come to this call thinking that it's a rate and date call and we're taking you into this mist and this, you're going to be a multi-billionaire, hey, that's not our intention here. What our intention from the get-go was to make you realize the information that we're reading is as best that we can bring to the point and to the minute, and to keep you grounded. Because so many lost their marbles over this. Lost a lot more than just marbles, mind you. So, again, welcome to the call. We are not a rate and date call, folks, please. And, Joey, unlike last week, where, again, we ran out of time because I did a little bit more talking. We want to, Joey said it sounds like a round table conversation. I'm maced with it. I'm game with anything. So, thanks to all of you for being here. Again, thank you to all of you for sending articles and helping Joey's and my job, making our job a bit easier. But more importantly, you're a gatekeeper. And like Carolyn, if you didn't hear the recording and said, and text me, hey, I appreciate that because that is teamwork. That's looking out for one another. And so here at the Gatekeepers Team Conference Call, we're not about selling you anything other than IQ equaling W. Intelligence, knowledge, and understanding equaling wisdom. That's it. And when it comes to your tax, legal, and gifting questions, we ask that you please seek the help and advice of bona fide licensed professionals. Outside of that, whether Vic has a new title, whether Vic's got a higher salary, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? I'm still Vic. I hustled my butt to get home to get this call open so we can get a good night of news out to all of you. So nothing's changed. Yeah, with the title, never forget, with the title goes more responsibility, longer hours. And when you really crunch the numbers, I think you come out on the short end. But it's all good. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to go to work. And I love the fact that Joey and myself can do the best that we can do for the community. And if our best is not good enough, hey, nobody can't say that we didn't give it a shot and we didn't try. So we've had a lot of imitators, but no duplicators. This call by itself stands very, very high and afar from other calls. So sometimes you have haters, and sometimes I'm not a hater, but I'll put it to you if you ain't telling the truth. If you don't like it, well then all is fair in love and war. And with that, my dear sister, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, Vic.
Joey, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I said, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Vic.
Good. All right, well, in that regard, I yield the phone to you, and it's already 5:45. Wow, how time flies. All right, let's knock it out of the park as usual.
You know, I grew up long admiring the men who stood up to ignorance, to indecency, to sectarianism, to racism, to violence. The men who were the civil rights leaders of the 1970s. They're my heroes in this world. They had the courage to actually carry out what God has always told us to do, to treat each and every one as a brother or a sister on this planet. And there's no finer man that has ever walked this earth than Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or John Lewis or so many other people. I want to tell you a quote from Martin Luther King. He has said this many times, and Mr. Obama has used it, but he used it in a political way. It wasn't really the essence of what Martin Luther King was talking about, but it wasn't with disrespect, because President Obama, has felt nothing but respect for Martin Luther King his entire life. And the quote that he speaks of, and in fact he even had it embroidered into the White House carpet in the Oval Office, is that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. A gentleman wrote an article, a very good friend of Martin Luther King's, about what he really meant about that. He said the famous line, and the gentleman's name is Ware, was originally intended as a spiritual truth, not a political one. It's very clear that apart from Jesus Christ, the idea of a moral arc of the universe was inconceivable to Reverend King. Ware told me during a recent interview it only made sense within the context of a declarative faith statement. Dr. King never intended to endorse some of the historical determinism. There's no guarantee that things would ever get better, at least not here on this physical earth. The good guys don't always win, not in this world anyway. Dr. King said that evil may so shape events that Caesar would occupy a palace and Christ a cross. But the same Christ will rise up and will split history into AD and BC, so that even the life of Caesar must be dated by Christ's name. Yes, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. In this context, it is clear that bad people often prevail in this carnal world where Caesar still rules. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't engage in political activism, but it does mean that we shouldn't assume some sort of magical force is inexorably leading us to some utopian, progressive, or liberal end for history. And despite Ware's belief that this line has been misconstrued, Ware is still a huge fan of President Obama. He said, "I have prayed with President Obama. I've been with him when he talked about his Christian faith in public and in private settings. And it has been disheartening for me to see folks that have no personal experience with him discount his profession of faith based on criteria that they would never hold people in their own congregations to," he said. So he told us that what Dr. King was talking about really was the city of God, not a city of man. And let's render unto Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and to God the things that belong to him. I told my son it was really interesting. I don't know if any of you have been watching the mini-series with Morgan Freeman. And it was the history of faith, a belief in the Bible, a belief in religion, in Buddhism, in Islam, in Christianity. He's chronicling what people believe, why they believe it, how they came to believe it, and people who are truly martyrs and leaders within each religious organization. And it was very interesting to me that on the miniseries last night, Morgan Freeman went to talk to a chief of the Lakota tribe. He's basically like a shaman. And he was interviewing this man, and I don't know exactly where he was at, but I believe that he was probably located in the Dakotas. And they were standing out in the field on a bluff staring at this huge rock formation, a sacred land to the Lakota. And the chief said that 700 years ago, 600 to 700 years ago, at that very spot, a woman she would have been an Indian princess, appeared to two men who were the leaders of the Lakota. She appeared out of nowhere, and she was totally dressed in white. And she handed to them a sacred pipe, the pipe of peace, of understanding, of respect for Mother Earth. That pipe has been handed down to the Lakotas generation after generation. The chief that was being interviewed for Morgan Freeman's miniseries said that when he was 11 years old, his grandmother was to pass on, and she called him to her deathbed and gave him that sacred pipe. As he started to grow up, he really wanted to be like white men, and he wanted the things that white people have. And so he went out and he pursued a career as a professional bronc rider. And he said he wanted the money, maybe even wanted the fame that went with it. And during one of his rides, the bronc that he was riding attacked him and stomped him so bad that he crushed his vertebrae right below the base of his neck. And he was paralyzed from the waist down, from the neck down, and they told him he'd never walk again. He said that when he finally was conscious enough to realize what was going on, he was told that he had a phone call. He took the phone call, and it was a spirit that came to talk to him. And the spirit turned into his grandmother. And his grandmother asked him what he had done with his life and if he still believed in the ways of the Lakota. Did he still believe that the earth is our mother? Did he still believe in the goodness of people, that they are our brothers and our sisters, and that we should allow peace to guide our earth? And he said, yes, he did. And he regretted how he had been living his life. The voice on the phone that he felt was his grandmother said, then God is about to heal you, and you will become a great man among the Lakota, and you must look out for the pipe. And she said, you must spread what you know to all mankind, because if the people do not learn to respect Mother Earth, to protect her from man harming it, and if people do not understand that the time has come for peace and that there cannot be any longer this racism, this stupidity among men, then you will be the very last person that will ever represent the sacred pipe. He said that after his grandmother told him that, within a couple days, he walked out of the hospital, fully cured. I told my son I just sat there and cried like a baby, because as Morgan Freeman was talking about us as human beings, you can deny God if you choose to do so. That is your choice. But for those of us who believe in God, who believe He gave us prophecy to guard us and to guide us and to show us where we're at in the stream of time, to not forsake us, to allow us to know that He is very soon coming back for us, because He is a loving Father. And as we look to all these different religions, and people believe all kinds of strange things, but the one beautiful thing about it is that these people believe in God. And it was interesting because Morgan Freeman had a scan done of his brain. And it was very unusual. What they had him do was he was to sit there for 12 minutes and meditate about God and what He meant to him, and what faith meant to him, and how he perceived God's will for our earth, for mankind upon it. They literally did a scan of Morgan Freeman's brain, and they've done it on people who are atheists. Do you know that people who truly believe in God, that our brain is different from those who don't? I never knew that. So if you get a chance to watch this series on religion and faith, it's truly one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Very moving. And to see people throughout the world, they had one gentleman who had snuck into North Korea to spread the faith. This was one other story. I have to tell you about this. He was born in South Korea. He was raised in the United States. He was very much a Christian leader. And he felt that the people in North Korea needed to learn about God because they're not allowed to have Bibles. Religion is not taught there. Freedom of thought, freedom of religion is totally suppressed. So he snuck into North Korea to be able to literally witness to these people. He was arrested. He was sentenced to 15 years hard labor. And he said that when he sat in his cell that night, he simply told God that whatever you have chosen for me, whatever happens to me, please allow me to be a vessel that brings great honor to you, and then I will fulfill whatever it is that you ask of me. For 2 years, he was a prisoner in North Korea doing hard labor, and he had guards around him all the time, and he began to talk to them about God, about the Bible. And he said he began to notice that one of the guards went out of his way to be near him, to hear what he had to say. And he began to talk to him. And he kept asking him if what he said was really true, because the man had never heard such things in his life. And the man became a Christian. And the gentleman, the pastor who went to North Korea and was imprisoned, said that after it was confirmed in this man's heart that there was really a God, he then realized that the 2 years he spent doing hard labor was so that that man could learn about God. And as soon as that man understood that there really was a God and there was a hope for him, as soon as that happened, the pastor was summoned and he was set free. He was sent home to the United States. It's amazing to me and to any of you on the call tonight who believe in God. I believe that would be truly amazing to you too. The power of a good and loving God. He does watch out for us, and we don't always get what we want. But most of the time we get what we need, and he never forsakes us. And he never does anything without forewarning us and telling us so that we know that it came from him, so that we can have peace and faith and hope. So we're very sorry that Martin Luther King isn't among us today, that Nelson Mandela is not here among us. That there are many good men on this earth, and many of them that will rise up, and they will carry on the legacy of these unbelievably great giants among mankind. I want to share a little bit with you about the environment. There was some good news that came out. I don't know if you guys had seen this or not. I'm pretty excited about it. The entire organic community of the United States just won a massive victory. The DARK Act was passed by President Obama and some Senates to prohibit labeling of GMOs nationwide. The U.S. Court of Appeals, though, just passed a law that enables states and counties to completely ban genetically engineered crops from ever being planted in the first place. Think about that for a minute. You see, back in the year 2000, Monsanto undermined all U.S. organic and conventional farming by claiming that manipulating genomic material of plants did not introduce dangerous bacteria or even plant pests into the equation, that their noxious frankenfoods prove otherwise. So biochronology giants figured a way to not have their cancer-causing, Alzheimer's-causing pesticide-laden plant classified as a risk to the environment of humans, but now none of that really matters anymore. Thanks to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and their recent interpretation of the Plant Protection Act, all U.S. states, counties, and local communities can actually ban or regulate the planting of any and all commercially grown, genetically engineered crops, no matter what the feds or Monsanto's claim about GMO. Toxic pesticides, habitat loss, disease, industrial agriculture, and climate change have been pushing valuable pollinators to the brink of extinction for decades. Thanks to a bold move from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, one species of bees, the rusty-patched bumblebee, may now have a chance at survival thanks to its new endangered species status. Pollinators like the rusty-patched bumblebee pollinate a lot of our food. The economic value of pollination services provided by bees and other pollinators is estimated at $3 billion plus per year in the United States. And as Vic was talking tonight about Ringling Brothers, Barnum Bailey, ever since I was a little girl, in fact, I think I may still have the book, I have prayed for that moment. Whenever I saw animals behind bars, living in cages, as though they were criminals and they had done something wrong, I could never make this right inside my mind. Many years ago, I went to a zoo. It was my first and last time I've ever been to a zoo. And there was a gorilla there. His name was Abe. I stood on the side of a glassed-in wall and stared at this magnificent silverback sitting on a concrete cave with no trees, no real daylight, no access to even ever going outside, and realized that mankind had let him down. We had taken him from the wild. We had taken him from his family. And we had imprisoned him for life. And for what? So that people could walk by and eat candy canes or, candy apples or whatever and stare at this poor animal. That's called entertainment. I never understood how anybody could view the abuse of an animal as entertainment. I've never forgotten him. If I close my eyes, I can still see his face. And I'm standing there realizing I paid a ticket so that he could be tortured for the rest of his life. I never really forgave myself for that. And I used to see the trains come through our town. In fact, they come to the town where I live now. And they would bring the animals to Barnum Bailey. That's like the Holocaust trains. And people in their ignorance say, oh, you dumb environmentalist, you liberals, you closed down Barnum Bailey and you're costing 500 people their jobs. Really? 500 people their jobs? How many countless animals were torn from the wild as their parents were killed and the babies were captive so that we could feed the zoos in Barnum and Bailey? 150 years of animal abuse? Where are these people? How do they not understand? I used to always think, what if you took a person and took their child away from him and locked him in a cage and showed him to people? How would you feel as a human being? The animals are no less worthy of our respect. God created those animals. He created them as a thing of beauty and enjoyment to share this world with us. It's like the Lakota chief said, Mother Earth, she is the source of life. She is not a resource. To read you this article about Barnum and Bailey. In the shameful time before the Emancipation Proclamation, P.T. Barnum took a first step towards becoming America's premier showman with a $1,000 purchase of an elderly African-American woman whose owner had been exhibiting her as the 161-year-old wet nurse of George Washington. The greatest natural and national curiosity in the world. That's what they said about her. The woman's name was Joyce Heth. She was the slave of Augustine Washington, the father of George Washington. When the novelty wore off and the ticket sales for the traveling curiosity declined, Barnum planted an anonymous letter in a Boston newspaper saying that it was all a humbug, but the truth was vastly more interesting. And what purports to be a remarkably old woman is simply a curiously constructed automation. Ticket sales soared. Barnum made an added score after the woman died by selling 1,500 tickets to her public autopsy in a New York saloon. Barnum's subsequent ventures included Juba, an astonishingly talented dancer in the breakdown style, melding African dance with Irish step dancing. The problem was that Juba was black in a time when theaters would only permit white performers. Barnum fitted him with a bad wig and he rubbed charcoal on his face. Juba became the first black man to appear as a white man in blackface. Juba went off on his own after being written up by Charles Dickens in the Chronicle of a New York Visit. And then Barnum underwent a brush with bankruptcy. His own fortune came after he mounted an elephantine expedition to Sri Lanka that brought back 9 elephants. The greatest show on earth was born. Barnum was assisted by Richard Toady Hamilton, who bragged he had grabbed more space for nothing than anyone you could ever know of. The New York Times said he was the greatest press agent who ever lived. The Times noted that Hamilton had never even known how to tell a lie when the truth would do as well. And when Barnum's health was faltering in early of April 1891, Hamilton contrived to revive him by spreading a bit of fake news, informing the press that the legendary showman had died. Barnum rebounded as he read his own obituaries the next morning, complete with pictures of him dead. Strength and profit for generations, Barnum explained. Indeed it did. And Barnum's name, along with all of this, went on long after his demise. He had partnered with James Bailey, who continued to give Barnum top billing. The show was purchased by the Ringling Brothers after Bailey's death, likely from a tiny insect bite on the nose that became infected. It was seen by karma for a man who was nothing more than a control freak who had ordered the execution of 7 of his elephants who failed to do as he bid them to. Last week the word came. The show is finally in its last season. The end was presaged in part in 1897 when the Ringling Brothers Circus, founded by 5 brothers of that name, became the first show to pair the big top with a black tent that used an Edison Vitascope to show moving images of boxing champions James Gentleman Jim Corbett in action, along with other films. Movies and television came to supplant circuses as a source of entertainment, but the greatest show survived and might have continued were it not for the dark truth that Barnum and Hamilton were no longer to dispel. Back when the cruel treatment of elephants first became a public issue, Barnum persuaded ASPCA founder Henry Bergh that the creature's thick skin prevented them from feeling pain when they were beaten and prodded with bull hooks. Never mind that the hooks could only work if they did indeed hurt. Never mind how gently the animals nuzzled each other, stroking their fellow creature's supposedly insensitive skin. Anyway, Barnum made it known that he had a provision to build a monument to Bergh for his support. So the bull hooks got smaller over the years, but the fact outlasted fiction. And in 2015, the show announced that it would be phasing out elephants. They remain the heart of what makes a circus. And last week, the greatest show on earth announced that it will cease to be a show at all. It's going to give its last performance in May of 2017. Thank God. This evil chapter in the history of mankind is coming to an end. ExxonMobil has lost a key in an investigation into whether the oil giant misled the public about the dangers of climate change. A Massachusetts judge ordered Exxon on Wednesday to hand over more than 4 decades of the company's climate change research. The court rejected Exxon's emergency motion to kill the demand from Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, who was investigating allegations the company ignored internal scientific research going back to the 1970s. Tillerson repeatedly ducked questions about the issues from U.S. senators at his, as they were interviewing him, remember, last week, to see if he was actually fit to be our secretary. Anyway, asked if he lacks the knowledge to respond to or is simply refusing to answer the questions about environmental deceit, Tillerson said, well, it's just a little bit of both. Last April, Massachusetts demanded Exxon turn over documents going back to 1976 related to the company's study of carbon emissions and the effects of those emissions on our climate. Exxon must now end its obstructive tactics and come clean about whether it misled Massachusetts consumers and investors about what it knew about climate change, its causes, and its effects. Exxon tried to kill the demand for the documents by arguing the investigation is politically motivated. And the company cited a speech from Healey back in March. He said, we can all see today the troubling disconnect between what Exxon knew, what the industry folks knew, and what the company and the industry chose to share with us. But the Massachusetts judge said the remarks are not evidence of any actionable bias and that the term seems logical for the Attorney General to inform the public about the basis of the investigations. And despite the paper trail that Tillerson denies, Exxon lobbied against those sanctions. But at one point, Senator Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's 2016 running mate, read from a 1982 letter uncovered by Inside Climate News that was written by the Exxon scientist. Over the past several years, a clear scientific consensus has emerged regarding the expected climate effects of increased atmospheric CO2. Roger Cohen, Exxon's former director of theoretical and mathematical scientists, wrote in that letter. Cohen wrote that the consensus is that the doubling of carbon emissions from pre-industrial revolution levels would cause a rise in temperatures that would bring about significant changes in the Earth's climate. Exxon also faces a climate change investigation from the New York Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman. The New York State Court ordered Exxon to comply with 2 subpoenas last fall. Again, Exxon continues to deny all such allegations. And as we're looking to the future, and as an environmentalist, I will say again, when it comes to Myron Ebel or Scott Pruitt, and these men are looking to head up the EPA in our country. These men want to be vetted into office so that we can return to the George Bush legacy, because they were part of George Bush's team. Before they decide to make these creatures, because I won't call them men, public servants, there is nothing servant about them. These men are here to line their pockets, and those are the millionaires and the billionaires lining up to rape and pillage our country. And if you don't believe that's true, I don't know what to say to you. because they did it during George Bush's era, and they got away with so many damning things. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s, into the early 2000s. It has not been a pretty time for our Earth. A legal fight to clean up tons of chicken manure following the waters of Oklahoma's bucolic northeastern corner, much of it from neighboring Arkansas, was in full swing 6 years ago when the conservative lawyer Scott Pruitt took office as Oklahoma's Attorney General. He put on the brakes. Rather than push for a federal judge to punish the companies by extracting perhaps tens of millions of dollars in damages, Oklahoma's new chief law enforcement officer quietly negotiated a deal to simply study the problem at a later time. The move came after he had taken tens of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from executives and lawyers from the poultry industry. It was just one of a series of instances in which Mr. Pruitt put cooperation with industry before confrontation as he sought to blunt the impact of federal environmental policies in his state. Any policy against oil, gas, agriculture, or any other interest. He has even sued the Environmental Protection Agency 14 different times. He is expected to shelve the Obama administration's aggressive environmental enforcement, embrace a more collaborative approach with the industries that the agency is charged with policing, many of which have helped him advance his personal political career. The impact would stretch from the nation's waterways to the planet's climate. It is the EPA that carries out and enforces rules to combat global warming. By the way, Mr. Pruitt, they've done a research, a polling, if you will, of Americans. Only 19% of the country are behind you doing that. The rest of us say we want a clean environment. We want our children to breathe free, clean air and water. We want our pristine wildernesses kept intact. He has advocated and stood up for the profit of business, be it the poultry companies, the energy industry, all the other polluters, at the expense of people who have to drink the water or breathe the air. On Thursday, a coalition of 23 powerful conservative advocacy groups endorsed Mr. Pruitt's nomination. Well, I bet you did. He has spent the last 7 years suing the EPA. So how could it be possible that he would be expected to be effective and enforce the rules to protect the EPA? The nominee has spent his entire career attempting to dismantle environmental protections, and he is unacceptable. That's why Mr. Pruitt is the first EPA nominee from either party that the Environmental Defense Fund has opposed in their 50-year history. Some experts say that while returning more authority to states, which is what he says would be desirable, in some cases, though, the environmental protection is probably not one of them that you would turn over to the states. States have limited ability to regulate pollution from outside their states, and almost every state is downstream or downwind from another polluter. Case in point, the green country chicken battle that Mr. Pruitt inherited in eastern Oklahoma. The phosphorus and nitrates in the chicken manure were causing algae blooms in the ponds, streams, and lakes of 1.1 million acres within the Illinois River watershed that reaches from Arkansas to Oklahoma. In 2005, Attorney General Drew Edmondson of Oklahoma, Mr. Pruitt's predecessor, sued Tyson Food, Cargill Turkey, and a dozen other major poultry producers for damages caused by the pollution and forced them to change the way they disposed of 300,000 tons a year of animal waste. As Mr. Pruitt ran for election, at least $40,000 in contribution poured into his campaign from 30 executives at the poultry companies named in the lawsuit at the attorneys' firms that represented them. Mark Simons, the founder of Simons Food, Donald J. Smith, then chief executive of Tyson Foods, and Gary Weeks, a lawyer listed on the court papers that represented them all. A spokesman from Tyson Food noted that the contribution to Mr. Pruitt's campaign were made by company executives and employees, including 2 former chief executives and members of the Tyson family, rather than the company itself. And we pointed out that our employees are encouraged to participate in the election process of public officials at all levels. But Mr. Pruitt quietly allowed the expiration of a 2003 agreement that Mr. Edmondson helped negotiate with Arkansas to reduce poultry waste and pollution. And Mr. Pruitt shut down the specialized unit of 4 attorneys and criminal investigators that had helped initiate the lawsuit against 14 poultry companies. Under his tenure as Attorney General, I don't think environmental crimes have disappeared, Mr. Edmondson said of Mr. Pruitt. It's just the filing of cases alleging environmental crimes that have largely disappeared. You know, covered them up, made them disappear, just like they did in George Bush's days. Make sure you retract them, don't allow them to be printed, make them disappear, you know. I want an Attorney General and a head of our EPA who is not averse to protecting Oklahoma's most outstanding waterways, said Ed Brocksmith, who is a co-founder of a group called Save the Illinois River. And at the same time that he was retreating from his predecessor's more aggressive approach, Mr. Pruitt sent a series of letters to federal regulators that in some cases were drafted by industry lobbyists and then put on the state government stationery. Open records obtained by the New York Times in 2014 showed that. The letters pressed the federal government to back down on proposals to tighten controls over energy production, such as oil and gas wells that can release planet-warming methane. Mr. Pruitt separately filed a series of lawsuits against the federal government, challenging regulations intended to reduce the discharge of poisonous mercury from coal-burning power plants, carbon dioxide blamed for climate change, and other emissions that federal authorities argued were causing unsightly haze in Oklahoma's air. In total, Mr. Pruitt has filed 14 lawsuits challenging federal environmental regulations. In 13 of those cases, the co-parties included companies that had contributed money to Mr. Pruitt or to Pruitt-affiliated political campaign committees. Baker Hostetler, the Cleveland-based law firm whose clients have included dozens of energy industry players, assigned 5 of its lawyers to help Oklahoma overturn President Obama's Clean Power Plan intended to combat climate change. The law firm did not charge Oklahoma anything for the work, Mr. Pruitt said. And David R. Rivkin, Jr., the lead attorney from Baker Hostetler, who handed the matter, said that his work was a considerable charitable thing, similar to what they do when major law firms give free legal advice to inmates such as at Guantanamo Bay. Go to hell, dude. Go to hell. The industries and the companies, through their corporate lawyers, are renting the state's seal. Listen, they are renting the state's seal in order to make it look like their self-interested arguments are being made by Scott Pruitt on behalf of the state. Mr. Pruitt joined with Missouri and several other mostly rural states in one federal suit to beat back California's regulations requiring egg farms, including those in Oklahoma, that wanted to sell in the state to seek more humane treatment of hens. Rejecting the suit, the federal judge admonished the plaintiffs. The court concludes the plaintiffs have not brought this action on behalf of their interest in the physical or economic well-being of the residents in general. Judge Kimberly J. Mueller of the United States District Court wrote in her 2014 opinion, but rather on behalf of a discrete group of egg farmers whose businesses will allegedly be impacted. Damn the environment. and the humane treatment of animals. Yes, sir, we're draining the swamp. Drain that swamp, boys. Really? How do you drain the swamp when you bring trash to our federal government, such as this despicable jackass? I want to know. Here's another thing that happened here in Colorado, and I actually saw the water. This is in La Plata County. Water samples from the Animas River near Durango, Colorado, after an accidental release of an estimated 3 million gallons of waste from a gold king mine by a crew led by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. It was an accident. The EPA said on Friday, January 13, 2017, that it won't pay the claims totaling more than $1.2 billion for the economic damages from the spill, saying that the law prohibits that from happening. Economic damages from a mine waste spill the agency accidentally triggered in Colorado, saying the law prohibits them from paying. The EPA said the claims could be reviewed in federal court, or Congress could authorize payments, but attorneys to the EPA and the Justice Department concluded the EPA is banned from paying the claims because of sovereign immunity, which prohibits most lawsuits against our government. The EPA said it spent more than $31 million to help clean up the spill, including work, water leasing, and payments to state, local, and to other tribal agencies. A total of 73 claims have been filed, some by farmers who lost their entire crops because of the water pollution. And they also said that there were rafting companies and that all of their employees have been put out of work, all of them, and including homeowners, because their wells were affected and they had no drinking water. In August 2015, the spill at the Gold King mine in southwestern Colorado released 3 million gallons of wastewater tainted with aluminum, magnesium, lead, copper, and other metals. Isn't that swell? And some of the affected rivers passed through Indian reservations. It was devastating both to the Navajo and to the farmers. We are outraged at this last-ditch move by the federal government's lawyers to go back on the EPA's promise to the people of the state of New Mexico and Colorado, and especially the Navajo Nation, that it would fully address the environmental disaster that the spill caused and still plagues the people of the Four Corners region. When the law allows the government to hide from those it has harmed, that law must be changed. Colorado Republican Senator Cory Gardner has said. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. I've written to you many times, and you've responded to me. And I know that you care a great deal about the great state of Colorado and environmental laws. And again, I will ask you, and again, I have petitioned you on behalf of Sierra Club, please do not allow Scott Pruitt anywhere near the EPA. Please. Protect our country. Protect our environment. Protect Mother Earth, Senator Gardner. State, federal, and tribal officers have been harshly critical of the EPA for causing the spill and for its handling of the aftermath, including the cost, not only to the people, but to the wildlife of Colorado. So again, I'll say to the people who make fun of liberals in this country, why don't you try learning, educating, reading a little bit about what's going on in our world, about our environment. Because once it's gone forever. Forever. No man has the right to destroy what God has given to each and every one of us as a gift. And each and every one of us has the responsibility to ourselves, to future generations, and to our God who gave this as a gift to protect what he has given to us, to stand up, to write letters, to petition, to picket, to demonstrate, to march, to scream to the high heavens that you have no right. You absolutely have no right to do this. I'm going to read you some international news. International investigators have said for the first time that they suspect, you have proof. Let's just stop. We'll use the word suspect. It's okay, right? President Bashar al-Assad and his brother, that they are responsible for the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian conflict, according to a document that was seen by Reuters. A joint inquiry for the United Nations, the global watchdog organization for the prohibition of chemical weapons, had previously identified only military units and did not name any commanders or officials. Now a list has been produced of individuals whom the investigators have linked to a series of chlorine bomb attacks. They include Bashar al-Assad, his younger brother Maher, and other high-ranking figures, indicating the decision to use toxic weapons came from the very top. The list, which has been seen by Reuters but has not been made public, was based on a combination of evidence that has been compiled by the UN OPCW team in Syria and information from Western and regional intelligence agencies. The UN OPCW inquiry, known as the Joint Investigation Mechanism, is led by a panel of 3 independent experts, supported by a team of technical and administrative staff. It is mandated by the UN Security Council to identify individuals and organizations responsible for chemical attacks in Syria. The use of chemical weapons is banned under international law and constitutes a war crime. While the inquiry has no judicial powers, any naming of suspects could lead to their prosecution. Syria is not a member of the International Criminal Court, but alleged war crimes could be referred to the court by the Security Council. Although splits among global powers over the war make this a distant prospect at the present. You know, I got to stop right there and say something. I read you guys articles, and it came from Ahmad Jabbar. It came from George Sabra. It came from Adel Shubair. They said that they were going to move ahead with what was going on in Syria, and that they would not wait for the UN, but they would wait for the Security Council to bring the backing. You know, I keep reading in the news that are comments made by people about the United Nations. And no, it's not the biggest or the best organization. But I'm wondering how people consistently bash it when they have no knowledge or they have any experience doing what these men try to do. They bring people together to try to bridge the gaps. And sometimes they get nowhere. And one of the problems that you have is that the world has changed. And these people who have veto power within the United Nations, such as Russia, when you look at what's happening in our world, the United Nations isn't ineffective because of not wanting to be effective. They have proven themselves to be ineffective because China and Russia have had veto power. Yet we see people lauding Mr. Putin in the press saying, oh, he's such a smart guy, I want to drop sanctions on him, I want to do this, I want to do that. As the United Nations and NATO is being made fun of, and these people have been the friends of the United States for decades, Putin somehow has risen to the point where he's being put on a pedestal, as though having a good relation with Russia is something that we should seek out. The number one hater, the number one enemy of the country of the United States has always been Russia. Vladimir Putin is not our friend. What's going on in Syria with the war crimes and those bombs that are being dropped, they're being paid for by Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has been in clandestine talks with the mullahs in Iran how to bring down democracy in the United States. And yet we have supposed elected officials in our country supporting Vladimir Putin and saying ignorant things about Angela Merkel, about immigrants, about the European Union, about Germany. Are you out of your mind? If Russia did not have the power of veto, this Holocaust that we have seen taking place in Syria would have been over a long time ago. So to make fun of the United Nations and their ineffectiveness, we have a problem in the UN. And there's a couple countries that should have their power of vote taken away from them, beginning with Russia. Because the most imminent danger to our country is Vladimir Putin. He is absolutely public enemy number one. The list identified 15 people to be scrutinized in relation to the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian Arab Republic Armed Forces in 2014 and 2015. It does not specify what role they are suspected of playing, but it does list their titles. The first is the inner circle, the president. It lists 6 people that include Assad, his brother, commanders of the elite 4th Armored Division, the defense minister, and the head of military intelligence. The second names the Air Force chief as well as 4 commanders of the Air Force divisions. They include the head of the 22nd Air Force Division and the 63rd Helicopter Brigade, units that dropped the chlorine bombs. The third part are other relevant senior personnel and 2 major generals. Hamish de Breton Gordon, an independent specialist in biological and chemical weapons who monitors Syria, told Reuters the list reflected the military chain of command. Syria joined the International Chemical Weapons Convention under a U.S.-Russian deal to follow the deaths of hundreds of civilians in a sarin gas attack in Ghouta on the outskirts of Damascus in August of 2013. It is the deadliest use of chemicals in global warfare since the 1988 Halabja massacre at the end of the Iran-Iraq War, which killed at least 5,000 people in Kurdistan. You know, when you read that, you think about President Barzani. 8,000 members of his tribe were killed. And I don't know if you folks have read or not, but Mr. Barzani has given his resignation. He's asking to step down as the president of Kurdistan to allow someone to take over after he's been president for the last 13 years. And I actually read an ignorant comment from somebody in our community telling the little fella to step aside and take his money, his theft with him so that they could have an oil and gas well and stick dinars in their pocket. You are an ignorant fool. You're an absolute ignorant fool to say that about President Barzani. When it came to the refugees from Sinjar, to the Yazidis, to anyone that needed help, it was President Barzani who extended his arm. It is his Peshmerga that stood up to Daesh to prevent the total overthrow of his country. It was Mr. Barzani who goes into the camps where the refugees are at to give aid. He started schools. He spent money out of his own pockets, tens of millions of dollars. You have no idea who you're talking about when you criticize Masoud Barzani. You ignorant fool that said this in our community, you're an ignorant jackass. You don't even have the right to speak that man's name. You're not even fit to polish his shoes. Go back and educate yourself, would you please? Beyond stupid. The panel has published a report in October of last year which said the Syrian government forces used chemical weapons at least 3 times in 2014 and 2015. The October report identified Syria's 22nd Air Force Division and the 63rd Helicopter Brigade as having dropped chlorine bombs and said people with effective control in the military units must be held accountable. The source familiar with the inquiry said the October report had clearly established the institutions responsible and that the next step was to go after the individuals. The United States, Britain, and France have called for sanctions against Syria, while Assad's ally, Russia, has said the evidence presented is insufficient to justify such measures. Well, of course you said that, Vlad, because your ass is going to hang in The Hague because you're guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide. Of course you don't want this to come out. And of course you want to get your filthy hands on Syria, don't you, Vlad? But you're a good guy, and you're real intelligent. You didn't mean anything, and we'll drop the sanctions against you anytime soon now, Vlad. Because after all, you did give us your word that you're not going to proliferate nuclear weapons, and you're to be trusted, Vlad. We all know how trustworthy you are, Vlad. I hope Mikhail Khodorkovsky comes for you very soon. A Security Council resolution would be required to bring Assad and other senior Syrian officials before the International Criminal Court for any possible war crimes prosecutions. That's something that Russia would very much like to see blocked. And so it's interesting, because as the articles that I've read to you folks, like I said, Mr. Jarba, George Sabra, Adele Schubert, all of them said, we can't keep doing this. We just can't. And the United Nations' hands were tied. As much as it frustrates us, as much as you just want to stick your hand through the wall, as much as you wake up in the middle of the night picturing these people and you can't sleep, no matter how many tears you shed, you can't erase those faces. We've all felt that. And it's been Russia every stinking time that blocked the support. As they moved in, they brought their military, they brought their planes, they brought their special forces, and they killed innocent Syrians. And Mr. Joubert, Mr. Sabra said, we're uniting. We're uniting with the PKK. We've got the Syrian Democratic Forces. We see Syria's tomorrow. It will be Syria's future. We have the people for an interim government. So we'll wait a little while longer. We'll see what the Geneva talks do. But in the meantime, we're planning, we're moving forward, and the time is going to come when we're going to do what we got to do. This article is so interesting to me that Jeff sent to me because it was just ringing in the background of my memory. We're waiting for Saudi Arabia. He, the Islamist alliance led by Saudi Arabia, wishes to participate effectively in the big fight of Daesh. He said Saudi Minister of Defense, Major General Ahmad Assiri, that the alliance is ready to join the international coalition led by the United States in the fight against Daesh in Syria and Iraq. The Saudi general made the remarks against the backdrop of the meeting which was held in Riyadh on Sunday. It included the chiefs of staff of 14 countries that participate in the coalition. It is worth mentioning that the Saudi Arabians have announced the establishment of an Islamic alliance in December 2015, where 34 Islamic states intervened in the strength to bring a military alliance. What raises the curiosity of this decision to hold a meeting in Kazakh capital Astana on the 23rd of this month to discuss the Syrian crisis. The meeting would be attended by representatives from many of the armed opposition groups, which are supposed to reach a specific vision of the situation on the ground. It is known that Russia, Iran, and Turkey, the country's major initiative to convene this meeting, it is not clear yet. And who else? These countries would be part of the negotiations. But there is a desire to participate, to find a solution to the Syrian crisis. Now, on the other hand, they are tired of the delays because there are those who want to rush in to get a share of the Syrian cake. The experts said that the newspaper that the United States and its allies are now interested in attracting foreign forces to divide Syria. However, the expert does not hang hopes on the willingness of those countries to engage in a military confrontation of seriousness along with the Americans, because Saudi Arabia and many of its allies, such as the United Arab Emirates, are mired in a war in Yemen. And the experts stress that the participation of these countries in a ground operation is only possible if the United States would put severe pressure on their governments. But they have agreed we must eliminate Daesh in Syria as soon as possible. And according to the belief, the coalition led by the United States forces, especially the Gulf countries' forces, will cross the Iraqi-Syrian border and begin the attack against Daesh from the east to the west, and therefore they would govern control of a large part of the territory, which would refuse to return to the Syrian state. Can you hear Bandar? If it was the Kurds, will they do so under the supervision of Washington and with their support? And that would apply in the event of the completion of a process of liberation of the country from the east, from Iraq at the hands of the Kurds supported by the United States and the Gulf countries. That would also end the division of the country and the loss of the Syrian leadership to the majority of the oil fields in Deir el-Zor. And most likely the international coalition led by the United States has brought this to their attention. You know, I've been reading about Iran, and I don't feel like reading about Iran tonight. But they were talking about, a possible replacement for Rafsanjani and maybe even the supreme leader. And what's really sad is that the Revolutionary Guards have so much power. And there is a speculation that the next supreme leader will not have the power that was enjoyed by Khamenei, because the Revolutionary Guards are really taking over the country. They have the biggest share of the budget. They control the military. They decide. They have a voting right in deciding who gets to help rule their country. It's absolutely terrifying to think what the people in Iran must be going through and how much they must fear for the future. The presidential elections are supposed to come up in May, and the health status of Mr. Khamenei is not good. In fact, they said that they even published pictures of him being in the hospital. That was at the urging of the Revolutionary Guards, so that the people could see that Khamenei was weak. It was to send a message of who really would end up being in charge of that country. When you think of the Christians in that country, the Jews, the Kurds, the Baluchis, it literally, it has to be a time for the revolution to come. You pray that we'll move forward, that we'll listen to Marianne Rajavi, that there will be a rising up. As I was reading these articles to you about Syria, all I could think about was Bandar. Because he said Iraq would go and Syria, and they'd have all their troops there, and they'd just move into Iran. And as you see this weakening, now they say that because Rafsanjani is gone, that he really did give support to Rouhani. And he's not really a good guy, but he's better than some of what they've had to deal with in the past. So it's kind of frightening to me. You worry very much for the people of Iran. And one of the names that keeps coming up that could be the replacement for Rafsanjani is a guy named Ibrahim Razi. And he was on the Judicial Council, the Death Commission, that killed 30,000 members of the Mujahideen. They said that they set up kangaroo courts in Tehran and cities around the country. And those cranes that lift people up so that they strangle you slowly. They had kangaroo courts, mock trials. The trials lasted for 2 minutes, and they would send people out to the cranes in batches every 10, 15 minutes, and they would operate those cranes from dawn to dusk. It went on from August to December of 1988 to send a message to the people's Mujahideen to never speak up, to never ask for freedom, to never demand a decent way of life for the Iranian citizens. We live in very perilous times, and after reading about all the death and the hatred and the sadness and the torture and the Holocaust in Syria, I pray whatever's coming, that it comes quickly, and that we actually do remember that the people who live on this earth are our brothers and sisters. By the way, this is something else Russia has done. It came out of the European Union. The reports have stated that Russian tankers have smuggled fuel for jets to Syria via the Union waters, despite a ban on it. Prohibition of 2 years for no supplies of jet fuel to be sent to Syria. At least 2 ships flying Russian flags have brought shipments of jet fuel. They were moved through Cyprus. So I'm going to read you an article. You can take it or leave it. I believe in telling the truth. And I have a curious mind. And Vic was saying something to you at the beginning of the call about we knew something was about to happen in the Ukraine, that our American troops would be sent to Ukraine and Poland. They're not there simply for a NATO alliance practice. We've told you a long time ago that the United States was moving people into strategic areas because of how truly frightened we are of Vladimir Putin and what he would like to do and intends to do to Europe. And so an article came out, and it came from Jewish intelligence. And this is what they had to say. And if you like Donald Trump, you may not like this article. But when I heard about people headed to the Ukraine, what it says in this article, I was told this exact information about a month ago. Whoever sits in the White House, it is his number one job to protect the people of the United States from all dangers, all clear and present and unforeseen dangers. You never know if it's theater, or you never know if it's ego. We never know what we're actually seeing or hearing in the press, if it's true or not. You never know what lives inside of the heart or a mind of another man. But we live in very, very dangerous times. I'm going to read this article to you. U.S. intelligence agencies have been warned by Israel of sharing secrets with the White House. In the event of the receipt of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump his duties, according to an Israeli newspaper, the discussion took place recently in closed-door sessions for Israeli security, highlighted the fears of leaking intelligence information too sensitive. Based on sources presented to the U.S. intelligence agencies over the past 15 years, from there to Russia and to Iran. The newspaper said that the cause of the fear suspected a tie between an undeclared of the U.S. president-elect or his aides with the Kremlin Russian presidency, which also linked it to the clients with officials in the intelligence community in the Iranian capital of Tehran. Somebody's heard something. Somebody knows something. These concerns, which began with the Trump victory in the presidential election, has grown even more after a recent meeting between officials from Israeli and American intelligence. They would not specify the date or the venue for that meeting. They said that their American counterparts have expressed during that meeting a despair for the intelligence community. The U.S. officials said that the Israeli counterparts at the United States Agency for National Security with a very high credibility for that information, that the Russian intelligence services are responsible for penetrating the servers of the U.S. Democratic Party during the recent U.S. presidential election, and there was much sensitive information that was leaked. Noted that the U.S. officials have reported that Russian President Vladimir Putin, there was an influence, a pressure. And they said that what they were referring to, what was published last week, that there is embarrassing information that has been gathered by Russian intelligence. The American officials gave tacit reference to the Israeli counterparts that they cautioned from that date, January 20th forward, the transfer of intelligence to the White House, the U.S. national security hunters who would fall under the responsibility of a U.S. president. The officials of the United States recommended that until it becomes clear that Trump does not possess an inappropriate link to Russia, that he is not being blackmailed, that Israel must refrain from the disclosure of any sensitive information, any of their sources, because the United States officials, they fear the information could be leaked to Russians. They said they would not verify the information, that attributed the information to a British spy. He claimed that Russia had gathered much scandalous information. The gentleman who came forward with some of that information has disappeared. I guess you guys know that, right? So like I said, whether you like it, don't like it, whatever, I found that article very interesting because of a conversation that I had with a young man about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And what he said to me is exactly what that article said. And he told me that before that information was ever made public. So we shall see, right? Well, it's frightening. I want to talk to you about some good news. Man, if there's some good news coming from Iraq. Good news that we've waited on for a long time. And if you guys remember when we talked about reconciliation, it wasn't just Iraq. It was a reconciliation between Sunni, Shiite, and Kurd, and all the factions that went with it. The Turks, the Christians, the Yazidis, all the different segments of society that make up the Middle East. And they've been having all of these meetings, all this discussion for a long, long time. I don't know how many articles I've read to you about it, but I've watched Mr. Obama send John Kerry. It's like a yo-yo from one end of the earth to the other, including Hillary Clinton. They were everywhere. And the meetings were in France. And they were in Davos. They were in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the European Union, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan. The list goes on and on and on. All of these meetings of all these different factions. And it was interesting. Did you guys read about the event that took place this last weekend? Let's start with this. Give you some information about the government. The government troops sealed off all the roads leading to Tahrir Square in central Baghdad after the Iraqi activists called for protests across the country on Friday. An Iraqi committee on Thursday called for staging rallies across Iraq in protest at the dispersal of the Sadrist peaceful sit-ins earlier this week. The dispersal of the sit-ins by the Iraq government reflects the corruption and the barbarianism of Iraqi politicians. Supporters of the Sadrist movement took to the streets Monday in protest at the recurrent security breaches and terrorist bombings in Iraq. Gathering at Tahrir Square, the demonstrators blamed former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki for the deteriorating security situation in Iraq. They expressed determination to put an end to crimes committed by the Iran, backed by Maliki, against the Sadrist. So they called the personalities for the cause of the fall of Mosul and accused of corruption to a so-called Baghdad dialogue. And it was a biggie. It was to be held on the 14th and the 15th of this month, and it was a Baghdad dialogue. Announced to Haman Hamoudi, all the countries invited to attend the Baghdad conference on Saturday. They would discuss the future of their country after the liberation of Daesh. And all responded to the invitation, and all would attend. They would come from Iraq, the neighboring countries, Turkey, Iran, Kuwait, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt to a Baghdad dialogue. They would talk about political, social, and security figures and the representatives of neighboring countries. So they had the meeting, and this is what they talked about. This is a reconciliation with these neighboring countries. It's very interesting if you go back and you look at the list of the countries that they had this meeting with. If I can find it again here. Saudi Arabia, Syria, Kuwait, Jordan. Lebanon, Egypt. Iraq's preparing for something big. The Baghdad Dialogue Forum came under the title of Post-Victory Options. The Forum of the Islamic Republic of Iran was there, the Republic of Turkey, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the Arabian Republic of Egypt, the Syrian Arab Republic, the State of Kuwait, the Lebanese Republic. All of them were there. They came to the Conference of Baghdad of Dialogue for the high impression of the guests that were invited. The Baghdad Dialogue confirmed not to return to the past and the mistakes of a political experience. This conference was in preparation for the one that will unite Iraq here in the very near future. 18 different points they discussed. They would emphasize that dialogue is an urgent need for it to coincide with the military victories. To stage the victory of investment requires an intellectual effort which will join together to confront the radical and extremist ideology that threatens all people of the world. It is necessary to support and enhance security in the military forces. It would be for the basis and directly to the country's security that they must recognize that there must be a societal responsibility through an awareness, a monitoring, a cooperation with the government. They must reform and change to bring a permanent, continuous movement to the responsibility of the public, that martyrs and those who were wounded, they would work to remove the effects of a transitional stage. They would direct religious disclosures so that they would promote peaceful coexistence and respect for others. The need to reconsider the election laws to ensure fair and transparent elections. To support orientations that will promote the principle of Arab and Islamic solidarity. To develop a balance and a robust policy with neighboring countries and non-interference of other affairs. And restore cohesion. They would set the tone for the strengthening of administrative decentralization, the incorporation of cultural and media to the principle of state citizenship, to encourage and maintain a healthy and sound general atmosphere for the exchange of views and ideas, and to do that with courage and honesty. The emphasis on the control of accountability of the media, not to promote any form of extremism, violence, blasphemy, or to inflame hatreds. To strengthen efforts to alleviate the suffering of our people who are displaced and provide humanitarian aid. Iraqis who are to investigate in their historical victory and take pride, and to be more determined to break forward to meet the challenges and the problems. To emphasize the need to move from an oil renter system into a product, an open economy. To reconsider methods of education, religious history. To emphasize the integrity and the independence of the Iraq judiciary, the rule of law. And to bring the legislation of laws that would concern the citizens, promote justice and equality, protect the freedoms and the rights, and review of the lawmaker, the testament for the conditions of the country, for the data that brings democracy. You know, as you read through this, there's 18 different points, just like the National Reconciliation Document, just like the original Erbil Agreement. It's very interesting. And to make sure the judiciary is free, independent. You know, it would fall under a Federation Council to look over it, and that they wouldn't have to answer to others. So, they would publish the Supreme Judicial Council Act, which has passed in the House of Representatives on Thursday. According to the law, where it is passed by the House of Representatives, approved by the President of the Republic, based on the provisions of the Section 1st of Article 61 and Article 37 of the Constitution. They would enjoy legal personality, financial, and administrative independence. And this says that they were talking about the Supreme Judicial Council, and their drafting of their budget and how they would be nominated, yada, yada, yada. The whole time I'm reading this, I'm thinking we're finally going to have a Supreme Judicial Council law. And all I could think was Rahim Ugali. But the gentleman that was chosen to lead the Court of Cassation is Mr. Zidane, and Mr. Zidane is a good guy. Announced that the federal judiciary Sunday, presided over by the Federal Cassation Court Judge Zidane, the super presidium of the Supreme Judicial Council, succeeding Medhat Mahmoud. The Palestinian Authority Chairman Medhat Mahmoud, President of the Federal Cassation Court, the Judge Ultra Zidane received in the presence of a major prosecutorial and judicial oversight this body and this device. He pointed out he will maintain the independence of the judiciary, and he will bring the administration of justice in his country. Waited a long time to read that. I just keep thinking about Tariq al-Hashemi and even Mr. Shabibi. For them to really return to their country and take up an active role and do what they need to do, even though Mr. Shabibi has been exonerated. Tariq al-Hashemi hasn't, Rafia Sawi, and so many others, and Adnan al-Wani, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But you can't even have a country that has security because the people of the country, they don't believe in Iraq because the law enforcement agencies and their judicial agencies are all corrupt. They can all be bought. Can you imagine like all of the families whose young men and women, husbands, wives, fathers, children have been thrown into prison or tortured or murdered or who knows what? How do they support the government? How do they become true citizens that actually protect the country unless you have a fair and honest judicial system that has stop gates along the way so that no one can use the law to destroy certain segments of society? And now we're moving forward and we're beginning to see that they're actually going to take a step forward and make the judiciary independent. It's just kind of, when you really stop and think about it and you just hold it inside your head for a moment, it's kind of overwhelming. And if you're an Iraqi citizen and all the things that you've seen in your country for the last 30 years, where do you even begin to believe, to see the hope? Yet they keep telling us that's what they're actually going to give to the people, but there is no hope. There is absolutely no hope without these laws. And the thing that struck me about this was when it came to the law of the Ba'athist and accountability and justice, and even the amnesty law, part of it, they tell us, literally has nothing to do with the government. It has to come from the judiciary and exoneration for any type of charge that was brought against these people, such as Mr. Hashemi. So as we see the Supreme Judicial Council actually put in the hands of a real judge, we're on the threshold of a brand new world. I've been reading articles to our community for 6.5, almost 7 years now. When you think about things like that, it kind of makes you crazy because you read it and you just kind of glance over it, and sometimes you don't even stop. You don't stop to feel it inside of you because it doesn't seem real. It's like, I don't know, almost like fake news because you don't believe it. But I'm praying that the Iraqi people will begin to dance in the streets here pretty soon because I think some very good things are coming. And there can be no national reconciliation, no regional reconciliation until they do the right thing and pass the laws. And as they said, they can no longer afford to be a renter state. They need to move forward. I saw this little article the other day, and I thought it was really interesting. The Iraqi government has spent $96 million ordering encrypted phones that could be used for civilian and military purposes. Do you remember on the call one night, it may have been Jeremy that came forward, and we were talking about those phones. They have a GPS system in them for the owner of the phone, so that if you're anywhere in the world and lost, they can find you like within a 10-foot radius. And one of the really interesting things is that if those phones ever fall into the wrong hands, every bit of information that is possessed inside those phones, it can be remotely shut off and erased. Very interesting that they are now ready for these in Iraq. I find it very interesting. So to finish the news up tonight, I'm just doing it all at once just to kind of do it and, I don't know, let you guys chew on it, I guess. I had a very long day at work today, and I've been busy lately. And again, I didn't do a whole lot of news, but I look for certain things. And, I always tell Vic, we've got the best researchers in the community. And when it comes to people like Cody and Ann and Chris Ann and Jonathan and Jeff has become, just a friend of mine. He's he's like Cody. He's up all hours of the day and night. Anything that he sees, that's out of the ordinary, he sends it our way. And we have all these people that are just so willing to help and want to make sure that you folks get the truth. Whether it's good, bad, indifferent, ugly, whether it's painful, whether you don't want to hear it, whatever, you got to see the truth, and I don't want to be protected from anything, and I don't know if you do or not, but I don't. Give me the truth, no matter how bad it is. Don't ever sugarcoat anything, because if you do, then you just never learn how to deal with things. And when you see the ugly truth, then sometimes when something really good comes along, you cherish it even more because you know how hard somebody had to fight for that, how valuable it was. Just like Hadi Madid. He was in Iraq and he moved to Europe. He came home to overthrow Saddam, thinking that he was coming back to lead part of the revolution, to bring democracy and freedom, and to see it grow in Iraq. He gave up everything. Eventually, he gave up his life because what he came home to was a lie. Nouri al-Maliki was prime minister, and there was no safe place for a journalist that was willing to stand up and say what was really happening. He knew it would cost him dearly. He knew they would kill him, but nothing would silence him. When I talked to you earlier tonight about the people in religion who stand up and who are true leaders, when it comes to the freedom to say what you think, to voice what you feel inside, those people are leaders in our world too. Those people help you and I. Those are like anchors that we can hang on to no matter how bad the weather gets, no matter how bad the news, no matter how bad the circumstances. They hold us in place, and they give us the courage and the backbone to stand up to whatever we have to face in this world. And the world can be a hard place, but it can also be beautiful. We just don't get it all at once. There's never all bad. There's never all beauty. It's just little increments of different things. But life is a mosaic. It's a tapestry. And I really and truly believe that there's been some really dark days in this world. But I believe that God's going to grant us a few good ones here in the near future. And I pray, I really and truly pray that he starts with Syria. I think we all do. So I want to tell you a little bit about Iraq right now because there's so much good news and these people have waited a long time for it. Said the United Parliamentary Bloc Chairman, Dafur el-Anani, that the international community and the regional countries satisfied the need for the return of Iraq, are you listening? As the player at the center of the region. That the end of the last chapter of the terrorist dash, it has become very close. And there has become a channel of the international community, regional countries, who are witnessing the end of the last chapter of the fighting. And that Iraq, it will return as the regional player, a hub, mainly for the region. Take their place at the head of the GCC. Lebanese banks are willing to help finance the reconstruction drive in Iraq thanks to the big assets held by these lenders through the head of the Association of Banks in Lebanon. Toby said that the Lebanese banks in Iraq comply with the directives and the guidelines of the Iraq Central Bank as well as the instructions of the Central Bank of Lebanon. He reiterated that the Lebanese bank's commitment to the international rules for combating money laundering and terrorism financing, as well as fighting tax evasions and all forms of corruption. He added that the Lebanese banks that have subsidiaries in the Arab countries and other states must finance their needs through the issuance of instruments in foreign currencies, noting that they would soon issue a circular on that issue. Remember the articles I read to you last week about Mr. Urzi and what he did for the Trade Bank of Iraq? He's over in Lebanon, Very good friends with Sinan Shabibi and Mohammed Saleh. The House of Representatives is moving to new legislation to regulate commercial agencies after he completed the first reading of the Commercial Act. The aim of the law, according to a copy obtained, that the first regulating of a commercial work of the agency, and the second to regulate and handle government departments and the public sector, and the mix to provide the natural and moral foreign person the manner that would achieve the goals of development and preventing exploitation and brokering illegal and believes in the interest of the national economy. The Cabinet has directed the ministries to direct the global foreign companies to adopt national trade agencies and agents to Iraqis or Iraqi companies registered in Iraq in accordance with the law rather than the foreign agent as much as possible, and do not mind the contrast within the exclusive agent of foreign at present to the passage of the Commercial Agency Regulatory Act. It is scheduled to have this new law that will replace the old law, number 51 of the year 2000. The disadvantage of the experts for the old law and its incompatibility with the current economic situation, since it restricts trade between the Iraq trader and traders of foreign companies that are dealing with the process. And he is in the work of commercial agents and was limited to a specific category of people. So seeks the organization of the Iraq economy to gradually shift to a market economy. It is the process of granting commercial agencies one of the important steps in achieving this. The economic expert advisor Mohammed Saleh confirmed most companies in Iraq now are the dealers and buy goods among traders, probably not from agents regional, as well as they import discounts on prices. To cope directly with the agents of international companies in those countries, stressing the importance of having agents who are Iraqis large for global businesses within their country. It has announced a number of businesses, men, and academics in the field of economics for the formation of a Supreme Economic Council. The council will emerge by the economic parliament that consists of 25 people They would represent the Federation of the Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Contractors, and the Iraq Federation of Industries, the Iraqi Association of Insurance, as well as those for travel, tourism, and representatives of formal for private sector. You know, WTO. And that the Parliament Speaker, elected by the Council members, in addition to the 2 deputies and the posted ministers, they are without financial privileges. The MPs and the members of Parliament would be for the rank of Undersecretary of the Ministry that would not bring to them financial privileges. He went on to say that the President of the Economic Parliament is elected and his organs. And he said that the Supreme Economic Council includes the National Authority for Investment and Privatization of the National Commission for Companies and Professional Associates, as well as the Council of Ministers and the House of Representatives and all of their members. And this is a good one. Thank you, Anne, for this article I'm about to read. Listen to this. The new U.S. Consul building in Kurdistan would cost about $600 million. It will be built on 200,000 square meters on the Erbil-Shaklawa Road. It is a sign between the United States and Kurdistan of a long-term commitment to an already thriving diplomatic mission in the Kurdistan region. The U.S. will soon lay the groundwork for its biggest consulate complex in Erbil, reiterating the strategic importance of the region for Washington. The new U.S. consulate building will cost $600 million. By the way, they have 4 new American military bases. Guess where they're at? Yeah. We did say we're coming to stay forever, didn't we? And this is part of the Strategic Framework Agreement, right? The Erbil complex will be constructed by 4 Americans and some local companies, and it will be finished within 4 years. The building will be bigger than the U.S. second biggest embassy building, which is in Armenia. The U.S. initially opened a diplomatic office in Erbil in February of 2007, which it later upgraded to a consulate general in 2011. U.S. President Barack Obama declared in his first speech on the emergence of the Islamic State that Erbil is the red line for Washington. The show of support was decisive in preventing ISIS from ever reaching the Kurdish capital. The U.S. Consulate General building in Erbil is second only to the U.S. Embassy's building in Baghdad, which it built on 420,000 square meters. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad was built in 2009, and it is the biggest mission compound in the world, which cost the country $750 million. It is the size of the Vatican. Erbil is now the red line for the U.S. because they believe in the future of Kurdistan. Relations between the Kurds and the U.S. were not forged overnight. The U.S. has had a diplomatic and military presence in Erbil, and Washington set up a military base in Kurdistan following the emergence of an ISIS threat. The U.S. military bases will remain here as long as the threat of terror remains, and this threat will not vanish in a matter of days. There are currently 30 countries, 6 honorary consulates, 6 foreign trade offices in Erbil. The latest to open in Kurdistan was the Japanese consulate on January 11th. The existence of the various different diplomatic missions in Erbil has upset neighboring Iran. A commander from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps recently expressed his concerns about the increasing number of foreign representatives in the Kurdistan region, claiming they were aimed at destabilizing the security of Iran. Opening more than 30 consulates is not normal, said the Iranian Brigadier General Rajabi. Most of those consulates are used for espionage activities. We hope that states do not take the problems or struggles that they might have to the Kurdistan region, said Mustafa, in response to the IRGC Commander, we find it strange for a neighboring country to meddle in our affairs or to set a path for us. We respect relations with all of our neighbors, and we hope for a mutual relationship and an understanding of our sovereignty with our neighbors. Listen to this. This is interesting, too, because here it goes. Well, Dinar again. From the Ministry of Industry and Trade, a new Arab said that Iraq is expected to exclude a number of Jordanian goods from the decision to impose any tariffs on them. He said, the minister, that the imposition of Iraq to customs duties on imports from all countries, the impact of the Jordanian exports to there, where Iraq is one of the most important export markets for the Jordanian products, pointing to a decline in the competitiveness of Jordanian goods in the Iraq market due to such actions. So he said that Jordania understands that Iraq would take a decision, and the economic interest it is for both countries required the work to remove all obstacles to trade between them. That includes customs duties and the importance of their commitment to implement the signed bilateral free trade agreement for the Greater Arab Free Trade Agreement. Somebody else is coming to Erbil. Guess who's coming? The Canadian government has decided to reopen its embassy in Iraq as part of a retooled strategy to fight the Islamic State. You have? Wow. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland's office, has told the agency that Ottawa seeks increasingly diplomatic presence in Iraq, part of its efforts to help the country with its war against terrorism and maintaining stability. In the past, Canada's ambassador to Jordan had been acting as the non-resident ambassador to Iraq. Well, Japan's come, and the U.S. has come, and Britain's come, and here comes Canada. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And listen to this. Participation in the first day of the International Energy Forum held in Abu Dhabi session stressed that oil wealth remains dominant in the world on the energy sector for several decades and probably would continue until the end of the current millennium. But the forum addressed the oil markets and the risk of potential losses for long-term investment in modern technologies. It is important to look the long way, post-oil phase, for the future. This needs to be a huge financial investment in technology development and innovation to secure safe energy sources without harming the environment. The conference dealt with big challenges like asking for the growing energy and climate change to benefit from solar energy, wind, and that is now the global demand. And the conferences then for investing in solar and wind fields is an era of diminishing cost, as the great challenge is to meet the growing demand for energy, where demand is expected to rise 25% by 2040. It must develop plans and strategies in the distant future to ensure a clean and renewable source of energy at a reasonable price in order to continue economic growth in the world. During the conference, they discussed the issue of globalization of gas markets and geopolitical results that threaten this. And this is a goodie. Orientation to adopt a green economy is one of the most important solutions that undermine the spread of poverty and unemployment and treatment, and serves the process of achieving justice in the distribution of income. It works towards national food security, and securing works on transforming sustainable development and experience gains that accumulate in the Arab region to a genuine and effective development policy and the economy in the foundation of a sustainable development and the protector of national resources and the environment. The environmental change course, the economic results at a time when the world faces major challenges, including food shortages, and high prices, as well as climate change. And for the environment and the transport links for sustainable would represent building a green economy that would contribute to reducing poverty and increasing the efficiency of resources as described. The green economy is based on environmental knowledge of the economy, being a recent example of working to bring rapid development that addresses the adverse impact of human activities on the climate change and global warming by addressing the interrelations between human economies and the ecosystems. Arab countries, including Iraq, must be planning to start the adoption of the green economy as well as the advancement of their economies based on their wealth and achieving the balance that this requires. In addition to the development of other aspects of infrastructure and deliberate use of the land and the form in which it creates a kind of balance to address the related problems of air pollution and the deterioration of it. And so here you go. The Millennium Development Goals, the long-term sustainable development goals. This is where the voice of the UN actually triumphs, because the UN is very much behind this. The UN has been a voice for the environment, especially as they all gathered together for the Paris Climate Agreement back in December. This is all really good news. Iraq is ready. The world is ready. Everybody's ready for Iraq to become the hub of the Middle East. That's the news. Like I said, I didn't print a lot of it. I'm just looking for certain things because you can only keep reiterating things so many times. We're just waiting for something to actually happen. And you know, I really and truly believe that the sands in the hourglass have almost run out. Iraq doesn't have much time left to accomplish what they need to. And it sounds like everybody's jumping on board to make sure that they do nothing but succeed. They had a phenomenal turnout for this meeting that's taking place in Davos. It's all about reviving our economy. And Iraq is definitely in the crosshairs of this Davos meeting. We shall see very soon, huh, guys? Anyway, that's the news.